Today we are going to take a look at one of the most requested artists, the vintage culture. And we are going to take a look at 4 different things that vintage culture does and you maybe don't. For those who wants to have a little bit spoiler, the first one is not overdoing your low end, but creating something groovy and catchy like this. And the second one is creating really interesting hook like this. And the third one is being not really lazy with ambient and the percussions like this. And finally, the signature thing that the vintage culture does, merging the elements from different genres like this. So hop in and let's dive in. The first one is getting that simple but quite catchy low end. In other words, for the love of God, stop overdoing your low end. It doesn't really need to be that complicated. For example, for this one we will start with a simple kick. This is from my smooth kick sample packs, you will find the link below. Sounds like this. We don't want it this bright, it's simple EQ to cut off, roll off the high end. Good. Once we get this one, what we need is actually layering this a sub bass. Here I'm just using these 2 simple notes, C sharp and G sharp, sounding like this. 2 oscillators, 1 sawtooth, 1 triangle. Triangle 1 is 1 octave below to get this really dark sound. A slight distortion and compression. And the most important thing here, of course, is sidechaining this to the kick. So we're gonna go kick, sidechain. Together. Straightforward, nothing so fancy. Now, in the track that we are making, there will be a couple of different basses, depending on where we are in the track. Rather than trying to make everything in a single bass, we're going to create another sub bass, but these are not going to play at the same time. One plays in the break, the other one plays in the other parts of the track. We have 2 oscillators, 2 sawtooth this time, because I want a bit more presence in the sound, and the notes are like this. How do we get this stereo effect, you say? It's basically the higher pitch oscillator, oscillator B, being in unison mode, creating this stereo field. And then we have more aggressive, more resonant filter, so that we really hear the sub bass part. And then on the effect side, same, distortion, compressor. And if I take the other bass and play this one, when I mentioned that getting this simple and catchy low end, in this case, for example, we're going to create kind of plucky bass layer, and that will be quite groovy and catchy at the same time. So how do we do it? First, let's take a look at the notes. So we have this really groovy, playful bass sound. We have all 3 oscillators activated, but the main driver oscillator is the oscillator 1. Here the volume is up, those are a bit quieter. Here we have the filter envelope, and we have a good amount of filter. And then we have the loudness, basically volume envelope here. And we are soft clipping to make the sound smoother. Beautiful sound, and on top of that, slight saturation. And if we play together now, take a look how suddenly bass becomes much more interesting. And to make the ambience, of course, a bit deeper, we will of course support this one with the high end and a bit percussion. So we have 16 groove here. The first thing that you should take a look, I have applied a bit groove. So sometimes it's a bit earlier, sometimes a bit later. So creating this a bit lagging feel. And because of the velocities here is slightly different. And to make it even more interesting, I take 2 more things, the velocity random mode and random depend here. The final piece, of course, sidechain the kick so that we have this also kick groove going on. Like a kind of pumping feel, right? This time we have this sample. Simple offbeat sound. Overdrive it so that we get a dirtier sound. By the way, all the samples in this project is coming from my Mercury Call sample pack. You can find it on the description below. I don't know if you have spotted, but now, because we have an effect here, it's a bit lagging there. Maybe we can have something short completing this hi-hat. Really cool, and it really complements the other hat. And together with the track. Remember, when we add a layer, we have to be having a purpose. We don't add layers to prove how good producers we are. We add a layer because we feel like the sounds needs that additional layer. So keep that in mind. And finally, of course, we can add a bit groove here by adding a shaker, a classic groovy low and high end. For this one, we are just using a shaker loop from my pack. If you want to know how I create a shaker loop like this, I have a complete video about it. I will add it here so that you can take a look. So quite really groovy shaker loop complements the other hats, and all together sounds like this. The Clave samples are very famous for this type of stuff. So we have this Clave here. The only trick here is we are sending it to delay so that it's a stereo. It's a bit more like going around our heads. Beautiful sound. And the second one is, of course, a short dark percussions to kind of answer the Clave. Clave is very bright, dark percussion is dark, so they are kind of completing each other. Together, let's take a look one more time. Do you feel it? The only thing that we need is a clap, like da-dum, pump, da-dum, pump. Right? But here we have a trick in our slaves, which is that this is getting quite popular lately with the house genres. And the main idea is get the main bass clap. In this case, we have this, and then layer it with the different things. So the first one is this, a bit darker, but this one brighter and more splashy. So if we go to the MIDI here, we keep the main clap and then we alternate the higher layers. So every other hit will be different. So if I play this, like boom, pa, boom, pa. And here just a bit EQing. And this really also works nicely with bass that we have, because the bass is did it. It kind of answering each other like every bar, every other bar. Take a look at the bass and clap and how they play. By the way, if you're enjoying this up to now, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button because it helps a ton. But let's jump back. And this is more or less the groove itself. Of course, we will have a lot of different percussions later on to create our ambience. But the structure, the base of the track is just this. And this brings us to the second point. And this is very signature thing of vintage culture as well. And whatever track that you are listening from him, there's always a very strong hook sound. When I say hook, don't think about the synth. It can be vocals, it can be bass, it could be synth. In this case, we will going to make a synth to stick to the reference track, but I want you to think about the hook as something that listeners will remember when they are taking a walk outside, the thing that sticks in their mind. In this case, making that sound with a serum. We are basically using the main keys of the track, and it's like da na 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 na, so going down, right? If I play this with the serum, doesn't make too much sense, but this is the part that we should consider a bit about what we can do with the sound design itself. It will be very handy. The first thing that I'm going to do, activate the filter 24 dB, drive a bit, feather a bit, open up a bit. And then I'm going to put it into the unison mode because I want this fat sound, but I'm not going to do it all the way up. I want two sounds, right and left, bring me this stereo field. Bring this down now. In the meantime, we can also change the form to the Moogie style like this. And this one, I'm gonna go sawtooth, but slightly different. Something like this. 3 octaves down to get this really dark sound. Getting there. And we're gonna put it in the mono, and then we're gonna shape the envelope a little bit so that I have a little bit release. And the second envelope, I'm gonna make it more plucky, a bit more release, and put it into the cutoff. slower decay. This is a good starting point because the main body of the sound will come from distortion. So I'm going to go to distortion here and pick diode 1 and distort it really heavily. Oh yeah. Very, very cool sound. In the reference track that I was looking at, there was a pitch bend when the envelope goes back. So there are a billion different ways to do it. What I'm going to do, create a LFO like this. Like in the beginning, we will have like this, and it goes up and drops down. And I'm going to put it onto the fine here. So if I play it, it will stay in the middle, so not tune. And of course, I'm going to drop this down. When I play those long notes, it goes up and again. Let's put it on the other one as well. Bring it down. And let's put it into trigger mode so that it resets when we trigger it. That means that we have to accelerate from bar to put it in the hot bar. Can you hear it? That's exactly what we are looking for. Other thing that we're going to do is maybe add an alpha noise to make it dirtier, because when everything is placed, this will be a very big leak. Having a noise will help. Let's put everything here as well so that everything is sending to the filter. Pitch it up so that it's lighter. Maybe adding another filter if we feel like it's too bright. Something like this on top of that. With maybe whole reverb. The first thing, now the kick hits, it's distorting, it's too loud. We're gonna put a compressor, so this will be a very heavy sidechain to kick. And the track is actually 123, so let me put the BPM to 123 as well. Yeah. In this track, the another hook is actually the vocal itself. And unfortunately, I cannot help you with that. You have to find a good vocal. But there are two more supporting hooks, supporting synths in this case. So I will quickly show you. This one is really classic melodic techno pluck. Sounds like this. It's the same idea, unison, but the envelopes are extremely short. So that creates this really short, plucky sound, and we have a cool distortion on that. And to make it even more plucky, I have an EQ, and the gain of the high shelf is also using the same envelope. So the idea is creating this groovy sound here. This brings us to the next point. And the next point is not being lazy with ambience and percussions. I know how it feels. You work on a project many days, maybe many hours, and then working on that extra automation or really taking care of the percussions or the ambience, it's really hard. You don't want to do it anymore. But these are really, really important, especially if you are going for this type of deep and melodic techno tracks. So I will switch to now full version of the project so I can show you around a bit the percussions and what I mean that not being lazy. So let's take a look. The first thing is when, for example, we are going from kind of intro or the verse to the break, we need to define our room. We need to define our stereo so that we can build upon that. So how does vintage culture does that? So here I want to take a look at what happens right here, right in the first 4 bars, I will say. Listen closely. The vocal takes over, so it's hard to hear, but first we have the stereo rim shots, and this only happens really in the break part. And the one purpose of this sound is giving us the ambience of the room that we are sitting. So take a look. Two things. The delay gives me, okay, we are in a sitting room, things are very fast reflecting. 2, I have a big reverb. Maybe we are sitting in a long hall, so things are reflecting, but big reverb. We have this ambient delay, and then we have this kind of vintage long but hall style reverb. The other thing is, of course, getting the smooth transitions. Like we are going here. A super classic, getting a cymbal and reversing it and then putting on top of each other. I like to do it in a different lines, because if you try to do it in the same line, it's hard to really perfectly match them. But if you do it this way, you can move a bit right, a bit left, try to get the perfect point. It's much easier. And of course, the small things that matters, right? And here we have another reverse, a new one. This is a bit more crash. Pretty low in the sound, but then we are completing it with shaker. Like this. And together, if you play, take a look at what happens here. That doesn't end here. Of course, I have more cymbals and more crashes. And one of the example here is just this type of very classic house style cymbals. Like if you have a drummer, you know what this is just basically just bum bum. So 2 hits right left. The same idea here. But what I want to talk even more is the pads. Especially the pads are one of the things that a lot of producers just ignore. But in this case, look how much ambience or tension that creates. We have 2 serums. The first one is the tension pad I call from my serum sample pack. Let me play it first. And the other one is more string. What is happening here is we are automating another delay chain to give this kind of a bit more the reflection, a bit more kind of ambience out of the pad sounds. The same thing in the other one as well. This has the same idea. All things automated with the filter. So in the beginning, we want this smooth transition, so we have to automate it. Dark. We're gonna open this up. You start to hear the tension behind, building up. Strings are getting in. Getting more and more and more. I know this is a work. This is a manual work. You have to automate it. Or if you have synth, you have to do it with the hands, which many people like to do actually. The other thing is, like for example, I have another pad sound to create even warmer ambience, because we are getting cold here. Everything is like opening up. To contract that, we are adding this smooth pad to just contract a bit. And when I was talking like don't have 10 different basses, but you hear here there's one more bass, kind of tensioned, more like a contrasting here. Single oscillator, sawtooth, quite a bit resonant, nice distortion. Just contrasting those pad sounds here. And the rest is really classic, right? You have your snare rolls. First the quiet part, bright part. This is the same snare. What I did here is take off a bit attack, so it's not that clicky. But then when we really go to the top part of the track, pum, 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 much harder. And then we add a clap roll here. It's a clap, snare, clap, snare. The idea that we used earlier, the same here. Do, pa, do, pa. Like I know many people just put high pass filter to their kick when they want to have filtered kick and call it a day. The problem is that those kick always sound really resonant and like weird. In this case, what I did here, take the same kick sample, but cut in the front part. Like this is you see that the beginning part is gone. So that very bright sound is gone. And then put the really quite aggressive EQ. But look at the sound now. Really warm. Like it's really nice to pleasant listen to rather than this ping, ping kick sound that we always hear. And this brings us to the final part, and sorry for interruption, but I have a small announcement. This video is sponsored by Skillshare, and Skillshare is an online learning community where you can find hundreds of thousands of different inspiring classes. For example, for me at the moment, I am taking a class with the Premiere Pro and Photoshop. I have already followed a couple of the lessons, both in the Premiere Pro and Photoshop, and some of you already actually realized that my lighting game and my maybe thumbnail game changed slightly lately, simply because I can a bit more so that I can spend a bit more time on those things. And why Skillshare and not YouTube videos? The main difference is, of course, you don't have the YouTube ads, so that you can focus on a bit more. And the most important thing is basically the structure of the classes, so that you can find all the exercises, you can find material that you can go through. For example, for my case, I have the pictures or brushes and that I can play through, or I can do the similar exercises that is made in the Premiere Pro and so on. So it was quite straightforward, and you really avoid this kind of trying to search for videos all the time. And other than that, first 1,000 of my subscriber who clicks the link below will get a free premium membership, so you can try it out for free and explore how it works. But let's continue now. And this is really important. And I see on the channel also that like some people hating some genres, because I like to cover really different genres, because I really find quite a bit of value in it. And vintage culture is kind of ultimate example of it, because this track is a deep house track if you consider here. But then suddenly we have this kind of very aggressive, I would say, melodic techno on almost peak time techno lead sound, middle of nowhere, and creates this extreme tension or contrast in the track. Let me show you also a little bit extras there, what I have done. I actually experimented different things, but what I've done here finally is just adding a bit EQ, a bit boosting here, and automating here. So like I said, when it goes down, we are also closing down the automate filter. But you see the contrast here. This is not a deep house synth, but this makes the track really different from all the other deep house tracks. The other thing that I didn't mention when I was mentioning about the ambience is this really cool pad sound. This is also not kind of common thing, but let me show you quickly what I mean. First, this sound. This is a very electronica thing. For example, if you listen to Christian Löffer sound, you will hear this type of things all the time to create this kind of real melancholic ambience. In this case, I just used analog strings because it has these nice strings, and that was something that I had in my library. So I changed it. This is the preset from 22 mellow field. I just make the envelopes passing in. It was too sharp, but I want this mellow sound. And then the pad wash. This is also another very electronica thing. You can even hear this more aggressive style, a bit more, of course, aggressive, but basically. This is just there to create ambience. Let me show you how much difference it makes. Boring, flat. Drama. And that thing in the background, it's like keeping the track going. I know you are hearing something else, and it is this my vocal chops. Also, this is a very common thing that vintage culture does to create this kind of more hybrid sound. It's like chopping the vocals and creating kind of pads out of it. In this case, I resampled a long, let me show you the original one. I added a lot of delays and reverbs on top of that, and resampled and reversed to end up with this. It doesn't make sense much, but this is actually complementing the vintage pad sound together. This should have been something that I discussed in the ambience or getting to work with it. But as you can see, I have, how many is this? 7 different returns here, and every one of them has different ideas. So I have a bright room for my drums, I have a vintage long one, the whole sound that we created with the Valhalla, and then we have a small room if I want to send some hi-hats, and then a shimmer. I'm especially sending the things right before here with the big break. We are going to listen full track, you will hear everything. And then I think this one is just another mid one. A drum crash, this is the very thing that I do almost all my tracks, to get the drums a bit crushed, a bit kind of crunchy. Like here, if I play here. It is basically the drums with a short reverb and overdrive. It just creates this crash sound. If I play drums without them, with them, it's just this extra brightness on top. And of course, our delay that we send all of things to put everything inside. Yeah, one final thing that I should mention. When you're using white noises, there's always an alternative. In this case, for example, here, I put a shimmer to the master and resampled it. This is a resampled shimmer of the track. Rather than using white noise, I like to do, sometimes it doesn't work actually, sometimes it's a bit too much. In this case, it did, I like it. But let's do a start to end and listen to everything and see how this sounds. Let's go. And yeah, that was it. This is a very big file, hard to explain everything in a video. But if you want to get hands-on with the file, it's on my Patreon, you can take a look at there. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you learned something, and I will catch you in the next one. Goodbye.